Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Beamer here. Um, so I've been trying to think of a creative way so that we could still be learning as if we were in the classroom. I'm trying to step outside the box here a little bit, and I want to try this new way of learning. So we're going to do it this week. I'm going to send you this link, and then you're going to watch this video and it is going to be you listening to a story from our Journeys textbook, just like if we were in the classroom. And then I'm going to ask you a couple questions that I want you to respond to about the story. And then on Thursday, when we meet for our Zoom meet, we will talk about them and look at the story again. So, the very next story that we were supposed to read before we left for spring break was Helen Keller. And this is one of my favorite stories out of our Journey series. I think it's a really cool story and I think you'll enjoy it. So, just like in the classroom before we read a story, we always talked about the genre. And so, this genre of this story is a biography, and a biography tells about events in a person's life. As you read, look for information about why a person is important and events in time order. So I'm going to turn the page and I'm going to turn on the recording. And it's just like on Mondays in class when we would listen to the story on the computer. That's exactly what we're going to do right now.
Helen Keller by Jane Sutcliffe. Selection illustrated by Robert Papp. Essential question. How can you communicate in different ways? Tuscumbia, Alabama, 1886. Helen Keller reached out. She touched warm, coarse hair. Her busy fingers moved farther down. They felt something smooth and wet. Slap! A hairy tail smacked into Helen's face. Helen could not see her family's milking cow, but she liked touching it. Helen Keller had been blind and deaf for most of her life. The only way she knew the world was by touch, taste, and smell. Helen was born in 1880 in Tuscumbia, Alabama. When she was just a baby, she became very sick. The illness took away her sight and hearing. Helen could not hear her brother's laughter or her mother's voice. She could not see her father's smile or the pretty flowers outside her window. For Helen, there was only silence and gray darkness. To learn to speak, children need to hear words. But Helen could not hear anything, so she could not speak. Instead, she made motions. When she wanted her mother, she put her hand against her face. When she wanted her father, she made the motion of putting on a pair of glasses. When she was hungry, she pretended to slice and butter bread. Helen knew she was different from the rest of her family. They moved their lips when they wanted things. Sometimes Helen stood between two people as they talked. She held her hands to their lips. Then she tried moving her own lips, but still no one understood her. Helen Keller. That made Helen angry. Sometimes she screamed and cried and kicked for hours. She threw things and hit people, but it didn't change anything. She was still alone in silence and darkness. Helen was hard to control. Her parents didn't know how to help her. They took her to doctors. None of the doctors could help Helen see or hear again. When Helen was 6, a doctor suggested the Kellers visit Alexander Graham Bell. Dr. Bell was famous for inventing the telephone. He also taught deaf people. Alexander Graham Bell. Dr. Bell told the Kellers to write to Michael Anagnos in Boston. Mr. Anagnos was the head of the Perkins Institution for the Blind. He believed Helen could learn how to let out the thoughts locked inside her. Mr. Anagnos promised to send Helen a teacher. Michael Anagnos. Helen and Teacher. March 1887. Helen's teacher came to live with the Kellers that spring. Her name was Annie Sullivan. Annie had studied at the Perkins School. She was nearly blind herself. Annie needed to control Helen's wild behavior so she could teach her. But Helen did not understand that Annie wanted to help her. For 2 weeks, Helen fought with Annie. She hit Annie and knocked out one of her front teeth. She even locked Annie in an upstairs room. Mr. Keller had to get a ladder and let Annie out through a window. Annie Sullivan. Still, Annie did not give up. Little by little, Helen learned to trust her new teacher. Annie began to teach Helen about words. She spelled using her fingers. Her hand formed a different shape for each letter. She pressed each shape into Helen's hand. When she gave Helen some cake, she spelled C-A-K-E into Helen's palm. When Helen held her doll, Annie spelled D-O-L-L for Helen. Helen imitated the shapes. She thought it was a game. She didn't know that the shapes spelled words. After a month, Helen could spell whatever Annie spelled, but Helen still did not know that she was naming the things she touched. Annie finger spelling into Helen's hand. One day, Helen and Annie walked to the well house. Someone was pumping water. Annie pushed Helen's hand into the rushing water. Helen felt the cool water in one hand. She felt her teacher's fingers spelling W-A-T-E-R into her other hand. Over and over, Annie spelled the word. Suddenly, Helen stood very still. All at once, she understood. The liquid flowing over her hand had a name. It was W-A-T-E-R. Everything had a name. Helen wanted to learn them all. She ran from one thing to another. Annie spelled the name of everything Helen touched. Then Helen turned and pointed to Annie. T-E-A-C-H-E-R spelled Annie. From then on, Helen's name for Annie was Teacher. That summer, Helen learned a lot of new words. She stopped using her old motions. Her fingers gave her all the words she needed. Analyze the text. Genre. Biography. How is learning that all things have a name an important event in Helen's life? Annie did not teach Helen words one at a time. She talked to her in full sentences. That way, Helen learned more than just new words. She learned new ideas. Helen and Annie took long walks through the woods and along the river. Annie gave Helen lessons on the walks. She showed Helen how seeds sprout and plants grow. She made mountains out of mud and taught Helen about volcanoes. Sometimes they climbed a tree and had a lesson there. Helen and Annie having a lesson. Helen was hungry for knowledge. She wanted to learn everything Annie could teach her. Soon, Annie started teaching Helen how to read. The words were printed in raised letters for a blind person. Helen felt the words with her fingers. She liked to hunt for words she knew. When she learned to read better, she read her books over and over. Her curious fingers wore down the raised letters. Reading a book in Braille. Analyze the text. Author's purpose. What is the author's purpose for writing about Helen Keller? Use text evidence to support your answer. Helen also learned to write. She wrote letters to her family and Dr. Bell. She wrote many letters to Mr. Anagnos in Boston. Mr. Anagnos was amazed by how much Helen had learned. He published some of Helen's letters. Reporters began to write about Helen. Soon she was famous. People all over the world wanted to know about the miracle girl, and Helen wanted to know all about the world.
All right, so I'm going to skip a page. All right, let's talk about the genre again. So biography is the genre, so that's the type of story that we just read. Helen Keller is a biography. It tells about events in an important person's life. When you read a biography, think about how the events are connected. For example, Helen put her hands to people's lips as they spoke and then moved her lips. This helps you understand that Helen wanted to be able to communicate. So there are lots of biographies that are written about famous people and people in history, and they basically just tell about that person's life, just like we just learned about Helen Keller. Okay, so this is the part that I want you to focus on. So let me try this pen. So if you look down here where I'm circling, these are 3 questions that I want you to think about and I want you to answer for Thursday's Zoom meet. So the first question said, why did Annie Sullivan keep working with Helen even though it was so difficult? So this is your opinion. I just want you to think about this question. If you need to listen to the story again, you can. And I want you to just jot down an answer. Just write down something that you think. Why do you think Annie Sullivan kept working with Helen even though it was so difficult? So think about what made it difficult. For example, the one part when she said that she hit Annie when she was trying to help her. The second question says, what makes Helen Keller an important person? So after what you just read about Helen Keller, what do you think makes her an important person? And the third one is, how are Annie Sullivan and Helen Keller alike? And how are they different? So you could do this 2 ways. You could just write how they're alike and different, or you could use a Venn diagram. If you remember a Venn diagram, I'm going to try to draw a little sketch of one here. A Venn diagram is 2 circles that connect like that. So on one side you would put Annie, and on one side you would put Helen. And so then you would say how they're different in the big circle. So how is Annie different than Helen? You would put that here. And how is Helen different than Annie? You would put that here. And then how they are alike, remember, how they're alike is where we would put in the middle. So that would be another way for you to do that. Okay, so I'm going to send this link out. I want you to watch the video. I want you to answer these 3 questions. And then on Thursday when we meet at 2 o'clock, we're going to talk about them. See you then.